Welcome. This is Chris Jones. I'm with the University of Arizona, Gila County Cooperative Extension, and you're with us today for our Garden and Country Extension webinar called Container Gardening with Bill Cook. And so just happy to have you all here. Let me see if I can forward this, got to get it set right. Just a little bit about these webinars. This is a weekly Zoom webinar. They'll be 60 minutes or less. They're held Thursdays at 11 a.m. in Arizona. So that may switch times with you guys if we are able to continue doing this into the winter. But Arizona time. Featuring a variety of horticulture and natural resource topics relevant to the environmental conditions and residential concerns of Gila County and beyond. You know, particularly this topic of container gardening, all of us can participate. A recording of this will be posted at this website, extension.arizona.edu/Gila. And so I've got all the past webinars at that site right now. So go there, and if the topic interests you, check it out. Finally, the University of Arizona is an equal opportunity affirmative action institution. Here's our agenda for today. People are really good about getting on. We had our little lag time and login time. Here I am giving you the welcome. I'm Chris Jones. The presentation here will start at 1:05 or at 11:05 or sooner with Bill Cook. At 11:35, I'll give some brief updates and I'll post an evaluation link into the chat box. If you could spend a little time with that, it's no more than 2 minutes. Lets me know how's this coming along and particularly interest that you have for further webinars. Then we'll open it up for a Q&A with Bill. I'm sure you'll have tons of questions. Please be posting those to the chat box and I'll promote you to where you can ask the question and we'll have a little conversation with Bill on that. If there's some time, we could have a little open discussion and we'll be seeking to wrap up before noon so we can get off to lunch. This is our presenter, Bill Cook. He's with the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension in Greenlee County. He's their Master Gardener Program Coordinator, and he's the one with the hat on. And just let you know, Bill is the UA Horticulture Program Coordinator in Greenlee County, with public education being the primary objective. He and his volunteers have developed gardens and direct education programs with grades pre through 12, as well as adult education in the form of monthly hands-on gardening and horticulture classes. Bill has operated a small nursery and greenhouse business from home for the last 12 years, doing custom propagation and specializing in heirloom fruit and vegetable plants. This is, anyway, so that's Bill. Moving this along here. Bill, that's it. That's your cue. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to allow you to bring up your files, and you're going to take over.
All righty. There we go. All right. One more step along the way. And slideshow. All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you, so I'm
okay.
Very good.
So we're going to talk a little bit about container gardening today. We're going to start with the real foundation of container gardening. It's a pretty large subject. Anybody that's doing much of it knows that it can represent a pretty good investment in money. You know, when you start buying pots and soil and plants and stuff, it can get expensive in a hurry. The beauty of it is that you can grow a plant just dang near anywhere. It's, you know, the only limit would be your imagination as to what you can have and where you can have it. But you do want to kind of follow some basic guidelines. And of course, your purpose has a lot to do with it. This is a container garden when you don't think about it so much in the springtime, but when you're starting plants to put out in the garden, short term as it may be, it is a container gardening, and these plants still have the same needs as, like a potted apricot tree or something. So you can do a temporary home. You can do a permanent home. This is, in this case, these are dangling off of the eaves of a roof. It would have been pretty hard to grow that vinca there without this. So plants can live out, their entire life in a container. It's a little bit different, a little more work, and there's a few things you have to do along the way, but no reason you can't have a plant in a container forever. This is one of my favorites here. This is a bed, which is a container garden that's actually been raised up. This is for somebody in a wheelchair. And if you look, you'll see it's wheelchair height. And the legs and the arms of the wheelchair can slide in under this so the person can get to the middle. So container gardening is a real big help if you have mobility issues. It really, really helps. You can get out there and do something. This is one of my favorites. I like to make the joke about containers can be a mobile home. You got your permanent home, you got your temporary home, and you got your mobile home. This is what's called a pallet garden. And I don't know if anybody has seen these. It's pretty slick, but these pallets have legs on them. This particular pallet garden is a friend of mine's house in Flagstaff. She has a lot of pine trees, so there's just a little patch of sun here and there. And of course, as the aspect of the sun changes, so do the sunny spots. So she just picks them up and moves them over to keep them in the sun. So, there's another, creative use for container gardening. So what actually makes a container? This is the first, most important part, is that a container, number one, it has to hold enough soil for, the plant for the duration. And you have to have adequate drainage. And the drainage seems to be the most common error. You'll see a lot of people will use an old stock trough or some of the lick tubs, like that blue tub in the back there, that are mineral supplements for livestock, which I really do like those lick tubs because they're food grade plastic. That's a real plus to me. But without drainage, what happens is they get waterlogged. And you'll have plants that they'll be stunty, they'll be yellow. This is a good example here right there in the foreground, that old stock trough there. Those plants look just a little on the yellow side. And usually what that is a drainage issue. The drainage issue can be lack of drain holes. It can be that your soil is too heavy. It can be a number of things. So they do need to drain. And drainage, half of the equation is the soil that you use, which we'll get on to here in a little bit. The other thing, they have to stand or hang securely. That's one of the things that I've had troubles with. I find a really cool pot that I like and decide to grow something, and it starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger and top heavy. So you want to make sure that it is secure for a number of reasons. If it falls over, it's not doing your plant any good. Soil can shake out. If you're fertilizing, like if you're using Osmocote or something, you darn sure don't want your pot to fall over and spill out your fertilizer, because you put it back up. Well, how much fertilizer fell out? How much stayed in? You don't know. And of course, one of the biggies, a container that has never held a toxic material. And that kind of brings up using railroad ties. There's, a lot of creosote and railroad ties. Railroad ties have been popular for raised beds. There's a lot of question now as to how safe railroad ties are due to the creosote treatment. One of the things you can do, and I've done, is take a little bit of pond liner and just line the bed with pond liner to prevent your plant from coming into contact with the creosote. So materials play a really large role in how well your plants are doing, more than anything, how much work you're putting into it. Terra Cotta is one of the long-standing favorites. It's attractive, relatively inexpensive, porous, but then we start getting into the liabilities. It dries out really, really fast. And wet Terra Cotta in freezing weather tends to erode. I'm sure most of us have probably had that experience where a nice Terra Cotta pot starts flaking off. So that's just a couple of the drawbacks. One way you can sort of cut back on that erosion issue is to line the pot. You know, use like a swamp cooler sealer. I think they call it submarine sealer or something like that down at the hardware. But if you seal them from the inside, they won't erode quite as much. Another real good one here, plastic. Plastic can be really colorful, as you can see in the photos. It's inexpensive, it's lightweight, holds up, and due to the fact that it's not very porous, it tends to hold moisture well. One of the issues with the Terra Cotta is that it dries out really fast because it is so porous. It'll dry from not just from the top, but from the sides as well, whereas plastic holds water a little bit better. Glazed ceramic, probably my favorite, but it can be expensive. It's extremely durable, it's real darn heavy, and it tends to hold water well. A lot of the glazed ceramic comes without the drain holes. If you go to one of the bigger places like like Green Goddess down there in Paradise Valley. And the benefit to that is, depending on your application for the pot, you can have them drill the drain holes just right in the middle of the bottom. You can do them on the side. You can drill them wherever you want them. And there's a real benefit to that. For example, if you're setting them on a wall or something, and you want the drain to drain off the back of the wall as opposed right on it. So glazed ceramic, if you don't mind spending a little bit of extra money, is really good. The heavy issue, I tend to lean away from ceramic on a plant that I'm going to have to move a lot. Solution to that is you can do a pot in a pot. You can take a plastic pot and put inside, for example, that aloe vera right there is actually growing in a plastic pot, and I just set it inside of the ceramic pot. I get to enjoy the looks of the ceramic pot, but as far as moving it around, or when I have to pull it up and divide it and repot it and stuff like that, it's a whole lot easier. And of course, the shape of some pots is not real conducive to repotting and dividing. You can see that yellow ceramic pot. If I was wanting to take a plant out of there, it would not be very easy because it tapers to the top, which is the reason so many containers taper from the bottom up. They taper out to make it easier to get your plant out for maintenance. Raised beds, they're just a larger container garden. You can build them out of just about anything you want. In this case, this is actually here at our office. We have a new county annex building that we're occupying here, and we're in process of putting some demonstration gardens out back. Now these concrete block beds, really, they go up easy, they're fast, they're fantastic. And that's our three wonderful AmeriCorps right there you're looking at, who are building these beds. So anyways, you know, raised beds are just a big container. You have to remember that when you're adding soil and plants and things like that, all the same requirements. They have to drain. And you have to have the right soil. So this is where the rubber meets the road here. This is another thing I see quite often. Soil characteristics, your crop success, you know, your matching containers and plants and soil. Something that you really need to think about to, you know, for success is when you're purchasing or making soil, the depth of the pot has a lot to do with it. And I've got some little drawings and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Drainage is essential. Some soils are thick, some are thin. They all drain at a different pace. Store-bought soil or homemade soil, pH is essential. And this is one of my favorite things about blending my own soil, is that you have some control over the pH on that stuff. And the texture of the soil, that has everything in the world to do with drainage and root penetration and that sort of thing. So you really want to be thinking about your soil when you're container gardening. I know a lot of us, we tend to grab the color wheel and plants and go to town with, you know, some art. But for any of that to work out, you really need to be thinking about your pot and your soil. Another thing you'll want to think about if you're container gardening, say out on your back patio or whatever, when you're choosing your materials, you want to think how those materials, how they match with the weather, you know, with all the different conditions out there. Weather on a hot patio, you'll find that Terra Cotta dries out so fast you'll be watering it a couple of times a day. Soil and air temperatures, this is another one. I take a lot of phone calls, and this time of year, one of the more popular phone calls is, how come my jalapeno plants are tiny and the peppers are tiny? You know, what's wrong with them? Or why are they dying? You have to remember that a pot, your entire root system is above ground. And it's much more affected by the air thermal mass of the soil. So a plant that sits up on the patio, the sun beats on the side of the pot, the air temperature is high, you're going to be dealing with some pretty high soil temperatures inside that pot. I looked at some just a few days ago. They were using the black nursery buckets, and they were growing chilies in them, about a 15-gallon size bucket. And the plants just looked real sad. Well, we stuck a soil thermometer down the side of that pot, and that black pot in the sun, the soil temperature was like 105. And that was 10:30 in the morning. So you really want to think about your pot, where it sits, if the sun is hitting it, that sort of thing. Out in the sun, you'll definitely want to use a lighter colored pot. I've gone so far as to tape a little piece of tin foil up on the side of a pot, just to keep the soil temperature down. And then light. On a patio, a lot of times, you know, next to the house, you'll get a lot of reflected light. Sometimes you'll have a spot on the patio where the sun never hits directly. And then other times you'll have a spot that in the springtime is in the shade, summer rolls around in full sun. And that's pretty drastic for a plant. So you want to take all this into consideration when you're out there container gardening. And the nice thing is you can always move a plant. You know, if it's happier in the shade and the sun's coming around, well, just move it. So soils, there's a lot of good soils out there, you know, ready to use. But if you're start shopping, you're going to find that there's a lot of variabilities. A lot of soils that you get are they're sterilized, you know, when they come across the state line. And of course, the reason for that is to prevent disease and insects and that sort of things that might be living in the soil. With a little bit more testing, some living soils can be shipped across the state line. There in that lower left corner, you're looking at the back side of a bag of Happy Frog potting soil. And that is a living soil. So the difference of it is when you've got a sterilized soil, you have no biological activity really doing all the things it does to help a plant. And you're pretty much committed to a pretty regular feeding program. When you get with that living soil, you'll see there all the mycorrhiza listed in that soil. So what that means is that that living soil, the mycorrhiza interact with your plant and they help your plant on nutrient uptake, water uptake, that sort of thing. And what I have found, I have started using the live soils for a lot of things, and I have found that the water and nutrient requirements are less. So even though you're paying more for the living soil, it's saving you on down the road. The living soil, you can, if you're using Miracle Grow and you know that sort of thing as opposed to fish emulsion, you can wipe out a lot of the you know, living bacteria organisms in your soil. So in that case, you know, you're good to go. There's other options. Miracle Grow over there on the right, they make more kinds of potting soil than anybody I think on this planet. If you can't find a Miracle Grow that's going to work for you, you're just not looking hard enough. They produce soils that have a built-in fertilizer, good for months, you know, and that's a real time saving, especially if you're doing something on a large scale. Same company produces a cactus mix, which is different. You start planting your cactus into the wrong soil, you're just going to basically kill it. It'll drown because cactus and succulent soil drains a lot faster. So the moral of this story is that there is no one ideal soil for your container gardens. You can blend a soil at home, and this is something that would actually be a subject in itself, so I'm just going to make it quick. There's a list of ingredients there: sand, cinders, peat moss, coir. I've become a really big fan of coir. Holds water well, relatively inexpensive. Vermiculite, perlite, wood chips. I make a lot of potting soil for the larger containers with coarse or fine wood chips. If you're using wood chips, the big thing to remember, if the wood chips have a strong pine scent, don't use them. You can compost them, you can, for a while you can do something. But if you're smelling that you know, that piney odor, your plants are not going to be happy. And the benefit to mixing your own is if you're using a lot, because anybody that's getting into container gardens can realize that pretty quick you're going down for a bag of potting soil. Next week it's 5, the week after that it's 15, and you can mix a cubic yard of potting soil for anywhere from $60 to $90. So why not use the native soil? Why not just go out in the garden and shovel it up into your pots? Well, it's just too dang dense. It doesn't drain, you know, and there's always, you know, like damping off. There's pathogens in there that you may not want in a pot. And those little pathogens out in the garden may not be an issue, but you put it in a pot and you're sure going to find out. Weed seeds, insects, nematodes, all that stuff. So the bottom line is, right there at the bottom, regardless of your soil choice, this is helpful hint number whatever, always soak your soil. Put it in the pot, soak it, let it drain a time or two, shut that thing off. There we go. Put it in the pot, water it a time or two, let it drain. You'll be surprised because some of the economically priced potting soils I've done that with, and when the drain water dried up, I actually saw a little bit of a salty crust. So some of the cheaper potting soils have a little bit of a salt content sometimes. It's you're getting what you're paying for. So the drainage and the aeration. We've mixed up this soil to use, and it's a coarse mix. On the right is the tall pot. On the left is the shallow pot. The coarse mix dries out pretty fast. It drains fast and it dries from the top down. So we've got a 15-inch pot on the right. It's drained down 3 inches. Dried down 3 inches. That's pretty good for a 15-inch pot. On the left, we've got a 6-inch pot, same soil, and it's dried down 3 inches in that pot. Well, that's just a little too much, isn't it? So here's an example of why that coarse mix would be for the deeper pots. So now I thicken it up a little. I get a denser mix. So there on the left is our 6-inch pot. Well, in a day, it's dried down an inch or so. That's just about right for that 6-inch pot. Now on the right, I use that same dense mix, put it in that 15-inch pot. It's not draining down very far in the day. And beyond that, the bottom, because pots dry from the top down, the bottom of that deep pot with a too dense mix will be waterlogged forever. And waterlogged is not good. At best, it's reducing your available, soil area. So you're basically not using the whole pot. Plant pot combination, your plant, number one, it has to be the right size for your plant to hold it. Whether the plant's going to be in there for 6 weeks in the case of a garden start, or 6 years in the case of a favorite bougainvillea or something. Pot, take into consideration the weight of the pot and the frequency of moving it. Going back to that bougainvillea, well, you're going to bring that thing indoors if you live where I live. Every winter it'll be coming indoors, and you sure don't want to have to drive down to Home Depot and hire 3 guys off the corner to come move it. So the location of the pot, where the pot's going to be sitting, you want to think about plant hardiness. Is there a lot of reflected light? Is it right out in the heat? Is the wind hitting it? What's the temperatures? Around a pool, sometimes you have a little more humidity. In a greenhouse, you definitely have a little more humidity, or a lot more humidity. And you've got microclimates everywhere. Everywhere on your patio, you've got microclimates. And you can play those to your advantage. Like if you have a cool, dark corner out of the wind, maybe something that's a little more difficult to grow could go there. And again, when you're doing all this, getting ready to stock up on container gardens, think about how much you really want to work. Watering. Now there's a big one, because if you're hand watering, the weather gets hot, sometimes you can be watering more than once a day. When you're mixing plants in containers in a large grouping, you'll find that some of them will need to be watered twice a day, some of them once a day. I've shot myself in the foot on that one so many times it's unreal, particularly because I like to set up an automatic watering system. I'm on about system number 8 or 9, and I've finally found something that really works, reliable, easy, all that. But when you're watering them automatically, you want to make sure that their needs are similar enough. Feeding, depending on what kind of a feeding program you're doing, how often do I want to feed? Deadheading, I've sworn off planting certain things because the amount of deadheading is just unbelievable. And how much time do you want to spend moving them around? So your level of commitment is to be taken with the same weight as what you're going to plant and where you're going to plant it. the thing to remember with watering, foliage, you know, plants transpire water into the air. But then comes the pot surface, the temperature of your pot surface, the soil at the top. Is the sun hitting it? What is that going to do to your water situation? The patio, if you're sitting on a slab, is that slab going to get really hot and bake the bottom of my pot? Light from the walls, all that sort of thing. It's all to be taken into account. Now, right down here at the bottom is one of my favorite statistics, and this is one I got from somebody else. So I went home and tried it. And by golly, this is pretty accurate. When your temperature changes from 95 to 105, a Terra Cotta pot requires twice as much water, non-porous, like glazed ceramic, plastic, by 1.5. And that 95 to 105, that's a change most of us will see during the year. Most of Arizona gets that. And here in Duncan, a lot of times that happens over the course of a day. Other water considerations, this is a big one in red. If you're using a garden hose, let the water run. I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen people wipe out plants by just turning on the hose and then watering them with that, you know, 100-degree water coming out of the hose that was laying in the sun. The size of your plants as they grow, you know, you might want to pot them up to a bigger pot because the root to shoot ratio and watering frequency are directly proportional. One of the cures for that is move them up to a bigger pot. Light colored containers, obviously, are not going to get as hot. Excessive watering, you're going to leach your nutrients away. And then another big one, this is the helpful hints column, saucers can accumulate dissolved solids. So if you start seeing a white crust or whatever in your saucer under your plant, make sure and take that out in the driveway or somewhere that doesn't matter and wash it out. Get rid of those dissolved solids. I like to use liquid fertilizers, fish emulsion. It's safe, it's organic, it's recycled. The bummer of fish emulsion is it does smell. If you have dogs or cats, they just love it, let me tell you. And you may not want them sticking their snout in your pot, I don't know. But I really like fish emulsion for all those reasons other than the odor. The water solubles, you know, like Miracle-Gro, Peters, those, they're pretty fast acting. They don't stink. They will leave a crust in your saucer that you'll need to deal with. The big thing with the water solubles, whether it's organic or not, is there's a certain frequency to it. Granular fertilizers, less frequency. Milorganite there, that's one that I use on containers. It's a real slow release. On a humid day, it does smell bad. And on a small scale, well, it might take you forever. I think the smallest bag I've seen is 36 pounds. But it is safe, and it is organic, and it will maintain the biological activities in your soil, which is what I really like. Another one I like is Osmocote. It comes in various formulas. As long as you use it to directions, it's safe. And it comes in many formulations. I've seen it for flower beds as a 4-month feed. I've seen it for containers, 5-month, whatever. So it's real safe, it's real slow, it's odorless, and it does come in a smaller container that makes it a lot easier. Now, one of the things you want to be careful of, this is one of those things they don't tell you in the book. When you get down to the bottom and there's all that loose powder, don't use the same measure. You take your little spoon of loose powder from the bottom and you're gonna bomb a plant pretty darn fast. Just some pictures I had of some neat ideas. And here, for anybody that wants it, is my homemade potting soil recipes. So I think that pretty much covers the foundations, and I think we're on our 11:35, aren't we, Chris?
You did a great job, Bill.
Oh,
Thank you
thanks.
very much. I'm going to leave that homemade potting soil up there. I've learned to grab my phone
Yeah.
and take pictures of
Oh,
things like that. So just letting
yeah.
the audience know, if you want that, just grab your phone and take a picture, and
Well, there you
then you
go.
have it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've got several questions coming into the chat box. Had a question here, but I'm going to hit my send button here. And I just sent everybody the the link for the evaluation survey.
Oh, cool.
I just want to ask people participating, open that up. If you want to just keep that open till we're done, that's fine. But it should take you no more than 2 minutes to fill it out, and just how to go and ideas for further presentations. Okay, so Bill. Okay, well, I hope you guys got that. I'm going to go ahead and put it on just me and Bill here. There we go.
Here we are.
And can you see this question and answer, the question here? I'll go ahead and read it out loud.
Oh, question and answer.
This is from Janine Lane down in Yuma, our friend. And she asks, we are preparing to put a cinder block raised bed in their garden to replace a plastic wooden one that broke down over time. One of my master gardeners felt that the chemicals from the cinder block would leach into the garden. Do you know anything about this? I tried to research it, but didn't come up with anything. So,
well, what I do know is that a concrete block, there's, what is it, lye, I think, that's in the process, the Portland cement, that sort of thing. And I don't know as it would leach laterally or not. We've been using the concrete block beds. As a matter of fact, as of probably today, I don't know if she can hear me. Hey, Sky, is that on yet? Is the concrete block on YouTube yet? Okay. Well, we are currently uploading onto our YouTube site a slideshow on building concrete block raised beds. So if anybody wants to look at that.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. Michael Chamberlain has our next question. So I'm promoting Mike up here, another one of our colleagues. They jump in fast. And he wants to know, well, Mike, if you're ready, just go ahead and ask.
So I was curious about, you mentioned the bag soil is sterile, and I wondered about mycorrhizae and other beneficial microorganisms. Can't they come in with the transplant, with the remaining soil and roots on the plant that's being put into this sterile soil?
Well, yeah, sure. Well, assuming that the transplant was in some living soil. But the one I've been using, there's several. I've been using Happy Frog potting soil, and it's preloaded. You don't have to wait for the mycorrhiza and the bacteria to actually populate the soil. They're already there, and for me, that gives the plant just that little jump start, particularly like my vegetable starts for the garden. Since I started using the living soil on those guys, my gosh, unbelievable. I've pushed my tomatoes from using the sterile soils previously. My tomato plants were taking about 10, 11 weeks to be ready to put out, and now I've got them in 7. And the only thing I did different was the soil. So, the proof is in the pudding.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, thank you, Michael. The next question is from Paula. I think she's already got herself unmuted, so go ahead, Paula.
I have a friend who's starting a garden, and she thinks she should use bags, plant bags, instead of pots. What's your thoughts on that?
You're talking the grow bags that
Yes.
basically sit there and the soil holds them up.
Yes.
You know, the grow bags, they work pretty good. I've seen good results. My only concern is that all the grow bags I've seen are black. And of course, if they're in the sun, that's not the best, you know. I think the grow bags, I know a lot of people use them above ground, but I believe they were developed for below ground. A lot of nurseries, they auger a hole, put the bag in it, grow the tree in the grow bag, and use the thermal mass of the soil. Basically, the soil temperature is what reduces the water need and helps the roots grow a little better.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I've got Nacelle up next. Nacelle, if you can unmute yourself, you can ask that question, or I'll read it to him. So Nacelle's question is, okay, go ahead.
Hi, we've had an old school garden that has been unsuccessful quite a bit, and we wanted to start planting an edible garden out there, and all of the beds, or not all, most of them are in old tires. And so my question is that a good place to start, or should we utilize another source?
I personally would use something else besides old tires. You know, there's compounds in the rubber, and when they sit there in the sun, some of those compounds are volatile. I don't know how unsafe that is, but I mean, if it smells like burning rubber out there, that's probably not a good thing. And the tires are black, which tends to overheat in the sun.
Okay, well, that gives me the information I need to really recommend that we utilize. We have some other garden beds that have not been used for anything.
Yeah.
And that we need to use for the edible garden. And the tires probably need to go by the wayside when we can.
Yeah, recycle.
Very good. Or at least flowers and things that you aren't eating, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to Walters here. And so Walters, if you unmute, you can ask that question.
Yes, Chris and Bill.
Yes, go ahead.
Sometime back when you first showed the soil characteristics, Bill, we got stuck on that screen and we missed everything after that. We missed all the screens after that.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I did record this program, and when I get that posted to the website, what I see is what I get, and so I'm sure that'll work. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. So
how will we find out where we can locate your recording and revisit it?
If you want to Google, and I'll go ahead and put it into the chat box, but just University of Arizona, Gila County Cooperative Extension will get you to our webpage. And this is something I call the Garden and Country webinar series, and I'm posting all the presentations there. So
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry to know that happened. Okay, I guess that was a question for me. Sorry there, Bill. Yeah. Okay, so Carol, I've got you up next here. Let me get up here, Carol. Tech. You got tons of questions here. There's got a lot of people, but we'll just keep on going here. And so Carol, you're ready to go.
Okay. The question I had is that we bought one of those tri-level wooden planters from Tractor Supply to be able to grow some tomatoes on the deck in the shade, because obviously the sun is just too hot for them. And the tomatoes do pretty well, but even if you get a full-size tomato plant, all the tomatoes come up as cherry tomatoes, really tiny. Your suggestions?
Where are you getting your plants?
Tractor Supply.
Yeah. Has this been issue in years gone by, or is this just something that just happened?
No, this is every year. We've tried something different every year. One year we had it on the back deck and we thought there was too much sun, so we moved it to the front deck where it doesn't get so much direct sun. And the tomatoes, the plants do up pretty well, but all the tomatoes are the size of cherry tomatoes, even when they're supposed to be beefsteaks.
But the plant is healthy and large.
It does pretty well. Now it's burnt out because of the heat that we've had here in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, because small fruit, there's a couple things that would create that, but those would also influence the size of the plant. So a large plant with small fruit, I'm not so sure what that would be.
Okay.
But I think I would be inclined to, what kind of soil are you using?
I use the Miracle Grow outdoor soil that comes in the big green bag.
Yeah, and that's good stuff. How deep is the container?
The container's only about 6 inches deep.
Oh, well, 6 inches is not very much root space, but I mean, a shallow container would stunt the fruit, but it would more likely stunt the plant as well. So I'm kind of baffled on that.
Okay.
Any chance you could get some deeper containers and take another run at growing tomatoes?
I think we'll try that. We've got some old stock lick buckets. I hadn't thought about using that, so
yeah,
I will try those next year.
Well, and I'll tell you, if you can get your hands, I call them lick tubs, but you'll see them out on the range. They're the mineral supplement tub that the ranchers put out for their livestock.
We own a cattle ranch. Yeah, we actually own a cattle ranch. We're the only.
Okay, so you know what a lick tub is.
We're the only ranch with we have purebred registered Scottish Highland here in the Pinal Mountains. So yeah, we have all that stuff. Yep.
So you can get your hands on some lick tubs. Well, if you drill some 5/8 inch holes and about 6 of them around the bottom, those make one of the best plant containers I have ever seen. They're food grade plastic, and most of them are a light color.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Janet Ortega, I've got you up next. If you unmute, we're ready for you. And I can ask the question too. Janet wants to know, she says, I know this is for container gardening, but wondering if I can use pine pellets, no additives, I guess as additives for compost. So pine pellets.
So what binds the pellets into a pellet form?
Well, pine, P-I-N-E, like a pine tree, pine pellet.
Yeah, are we talking pellets like for a pellet stove?
I don't know.
And I'd be curious what the binder is on that.
Yeah. So Janet, if you're able to unmute yourself, I can unmute you. No, I can't. Okay, well, we'll try to come back. I have an anonymous question here about growing vinca in Tucson. The person says they always die. Usually you can't kill it. So what have you got to say about vinca?
Water.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, I'm going to bring up our next speaker here. I've got a Viv Houghton. Okay, so Viv, if you're able to unmute, we're ready for you to go.
Yeah, thank you. We have a rose bush. It's a cane rose bush that's been doing well this summer, in fact, really well. And I deadhead it, especially when we're going to get really hot weather. And it just came back. It had a bunch of buds this last week, and for some reason, the ends of the buds are turning brown. So I don't know if I'm overwatering or what might be happening, but if you have suggestions, that'd be great.
Any chance you have thrips? Because that's usually what hits the tip of the bud.
Maybe. I don't know.
How would she recognize thrips, Bill?
The tip of the bud just turns black.
Just what you described.
The little point turns black, and that means they've entered.
Oh, no, the end isn't black, which is confusing to me, and there are no bugs or anything that I see on the outside.
So what's it doing then?
It's just starting to turn a little bit brown, and then it kind of dries up and it won't actually bloom.
Oh, the buds just dry up and never open?
Yeah.
Well, what I have found in my own roses, I'm not a rose expert, but I have found that when my roses are getting a little hungry and the heat wave comes in when it's really, really hot, that's exactly what mine have been doing. Remember, we had that 100 and whatever it was a week or two ago, and mine did exactly that same thing.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, they were fine just until 2 days ago, so it was confusing. But thank you. I'll try that.
Yeah.
It definitely got hot, although today sure looks like it's shaping up to be a good one.
Yeah.
All right, Judith, I've had you up ready next, so if you are able to unmute yourself, you can ask that question. And so Judith's question is, how long should it take from the time you planted red bell peppers in a container pot to see the start of peppers?
Are we talking from seed or from a transplant?
I think you better answer both because she's not on the line.
Well, there's, like red bell peppers really are the same green bell peppers that everybody plants. They're just ripe is the only difference. From seed, like, for example, a California Wonder, I've been getting them in, like some years, 85 days, and I say some years because it just depends on the weather an awful lot. A good example is, was it last year or the year before, we didn't get much rain out of the deal, but we had a healthy monsoon season as far as clouding up every afternoon. And you start knocking off 3 or 4 hours of daylight that many days in a row, and that 85 or 90 days turns into 100 real quick. But typically, California Wonder from seed, I'm going to say 85 or 90 days. And usually when I start them in pots, and usually the transplant that I'm putting out is, several weeks old, they do come a little earlier in the year, but as far as total number of days, transplants that I put out on Cinco de Mayo will have peppers on them, by the end of June, middle of June. Just a lot of variables on that. Variety, temperatures, sunshine.
Yeah, okay. So moving on to the next question actually there was a question from Carol asking me to put the potting soil up again at the end of the meeting, and I'll do that at the end of the meeting. Okay, so Joe, I've got you up next. If you can unmute, I can let you ask that question. So the question is, will ants kill plants in containers? If so, is there a way to prevent ants getting into your pot?
The only time I've ever had an ant issue with my containers, and garden in general, has been when there was aphids and that sort of thing, because the ants are up there harvesting the aphid secretions. Generally, if you're getting ants, take a look and see why they're coming.
Okay, good. Okay, Carol?
If you're using garden cloth at the bottom of a raised bed, do you cut drain slits into it? I have to use that because I have gophers.
You're talking the landscape fabric?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, depending, all of the landscape fabric I've ever seen, the reason for the fabric was, as opposed to plastic, is that it breathes and water will pass through it. It should pass water. If in doubt, just take a little piece and try it.
What if you're using just plastic?
If you're using just plastic, you're going to have a drainage issue. How deep are the beds?
I want to say about 3 to 4 feet.
And if your bed's 3 or 4 feet, just let it drain out the sides. Just let it run off the plastic. If the plastic is stopping gophers, I'd think twice about a hole.
Okay.
As long as you have enough depth of the bed that you don't need the soil below it.
Okay.
That's the problem with gophers. You know, if you've got an 8 or a 10-inch deep bed, I see a lot of people put, you know, hardware cloth under it. Well, the gophers still eat the roots that come through it, you know, so your bed needs to be deep enough to support the plant without the soil beneath.
Thank you.
Which it sounds like yours is plenty deep enough.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, good. Sain Kapoor, you could unmute or I'll ask that question for you. So Sain asks, I have lost many plants in containers because the soil at the bottom of the container becomes compact and eventually the plant dies.
Well, that's just a case of your soil is too dense.
The soil's too what?
Too dense, too heavy. You need a coarser mix.
Like that one that you provided. So I need to get the
Well,
get it
there's
back
actually,
up.
yeah, there's several mixes on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, and if your pot, the deeper the pot, generally my rule is deeper the pot, the coarser and the quicker the drainage I go for. And you have to remember that the soil does decompose over time, you know, and it gets thicker and thicker. Can't even plug drain holes.
Okay, so Diana asked to cite an address that you mentioned, and I can't recall if that looks like it was early on, and maybe during the presentation, but I can't recall what it was. So either she'll need to respond back with some more on that, or hopefully in the recording you'll be able to find it.
Yeah, well, and she might have been asking about our YouTube site, because we're putting up, as we speak, we're putting up a slideshow on bed construction, if that was her question. And that's just UACE Greenly and on YouTube. And if you don't find it today, check it this afternoon.
Yeah, and a lot of this Google's pretty good. The university's gotten pretty good about our metadata and meta tagging. So just do University of Arizona, Greenlee County, you know,
Yeah.
I think you'll be able to find it.
Yeah, yeah.
So Angie, if you want to unmute, I've got you up. And
actually,
so,
that just answered my question.
Oh, okay.
So thank
All
you.
right.
I just needed the YouTube link.
Okay. See, I was telepathic. I was reading your mind.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so moving on to Susan here. Let me see if it's Susan. There we go, Susan. I've got more than one. I've got 3 Susans, so this is not going to be easy. Okay, so you know I've got 3 Susans. So the question is, if you have no holes in your container, is placing rocks in the bottom work? You need to have some holes in your container. But anyway,
You got to have holes, because otherwise it'll just fill up with water, rocks or not. Yeah.
So yeah, you got to have it, let it drain somehow.
Got to have drain holes, and adequate. I've seen people drill just one tiny little hole and it just doesn't drain. You know, the soil clogs it. The holes need to be fairly large. You know, if in doubt, if you're wondering how big a hole needs to be for drainage, go take a look at a nursery bucket sometime. You know, they have some pretty substantial holes in them, and there's a reason for that.
Now, I just want to let people know we're getting on the noon hour. I usually try to shut down at this time, but if Bill's willing to stay here and answer out the questions, I'm willing to keep them going. I know,
Sure.
I know his tummy's growling, but Paul, you are up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So in making your own soil, I've been I'm mostly doing cactus and succulent, and making my own mix of soil. And I'm curious about the difference between perlite versus vermiculite. I've heard that vermiculite tends to contain water whereas perlite tends to shed water. And I'm curious to have you comment.
Yeah, that's my understanding of it. Now, I quit using those items years ago because what I have found, because those two items are pretty spendy, you know, when you start, if you're doing much.
Yes, they are.
What I have started using is volcanic cinders. And, you know, if you live any place where there's a cinder pit or close to one, you know, like they're all around Flagstaff and Show Low and those kind of places. There's places in Phoenix, there's one in Safford that sells cinders, but a lot of them, your choices are limited as to the size. But the beautiful thing about cinders is you can screen them if you have to. And at the cinder pit, a pickup bed of cinders, because they're light's like $9. I think I've paid as much as $40 a cubic yard, which is still a real economical solution compared to the perlite and the vermiculite. And like I say, you can screen them. The nice thing, the other thing I like about using the cinders is that they are acidic. Now, if you're using vermiculite and perlite, because if one of the reasons is because they're neutral pH, well, then cinders won't work because cinders are acidic. And that's one of the things, for most purposes, acidic is good.
Super, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just some comments here. One from Allison saying the dispensaries in Colorado use Happy Frog because it's safe.
Yeah.
And Janet Ortega put her question in here again. Let's see if it's a little easier to read. I know this is on container gardening, but I had a question about using pine pellets used for horse stalls, no additives for the compost pile.
Okay, and I've not seen pine pellets in a stall. What I have seen in stalls over here is pine shavings, and they'll just darn near sticky. They're so piney, and yes, you can compost that.
Okay, good. And it just like you said, you want it to be broken down because you don't want it to have it be smelling like pine anymore. And yeah. Okay, so Bill Maines has just added some comments. I think when you were talking about the tomatoes, he said too much nitrogen for tomatoes and also about using more phosphorus. So he might have been adding some comments when you were answering those questions. And Paula again said, which is better, holes in the bottom or in the sides of the container?
Well, you know, if you have a hole square on the bottom of it, depending on where you're setting it, sometimes it can, you know, it can sit there for a while and that will kind of slow the drainage down. If you look at a nursery bucket, which is, you know, made specifically for container gardening, you'll see that the holes are on the sides. Talking about the ceramic pots, there's a place where I go for ceramic pots, especially big ones, over in Paradise Valley, and they'll drill a hole for you. And what I've done, like if it's sitting on top of, say, a stucco wall that I don't want to get wet, I'll have them drill a hole at the bottom side, and then I'll take like a piece of copper tubing and some epoxy, and I'll jut that out the side and bend it over the wall where it drips off the wall. You know, so the location of the hole just depends on what you're doing, I guess.
Okay, yeah. See, water needs to go somewhere. So.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think, you know, Janet just clarified ponderosa pine pellets for the host stall. So I think we got that answered. John Beecham asks, how about using a sheep trough? Well, of course, you know, so anything about those types of things. And I'm going to come back over to the question. You just got all kinds of interest here. So I'm going to come down to some more of these questions people put into here. Okay, another one from Liv. What is an effective way to start vegetable seeds for container gardening? Like soil and starting inside. She's just new to the West here. So I guess seed starting.
Seed starting. Okay, well, depending on the seeds, if you're going to start seeds, probably the first thing you're going to need, and depending how many, I use a plug tray at home because it's got, 72 cells that are, 3/4 of an inch wide or whatever, an inch and a quarter deep. I do like a plug tray. You can start it in Dixie cups as long as you poke a hole for drainage in the bottom. Any container works. The biggest thing with your seed starting is quality of soil. Use a quality soil, and get yourself a germination temperature chart, because a good example is that a tomato seed, you can germinate a tomato seed in 4 or 5 days at 75 degrees, whereas if it's sitting on a windowsill at 60, it might be 11. The sooner you get them moving, people say, oh, what's the big deal? What's a week or so? Well, in my opinion, that you want them to jump out of the ground and say howdy, and which, depending on what you're starting, it can complicate things if you're starting a bunch of different things that require different temperatures. A lot of people use a heat mat. A word on heat mats: if you're going to purchase a heat mat, get one with a thermostat. The heat mat that is preset might be preset at 74 for tomatoes. Not going to do you a bit of good for your habaneros because they need to be 92. So, be aware of germination temperatures. That's probably the biggest thing a seed starter can do.
And, Liv, starting seeds, that's a whole presentation. So we might come back to that. Make sure you put that into the my survey, and might come back and just talk about starting. We usually a real popular type of spring presentation, but we got a lot of things we can still be putting in the ground now. So great, good question. We still got more questions here, Bill.
Yeah, well, we're good. I'm not turning inside out from hunger yet, so we're good.
All right. Pat from Yuma says she just transcribed your recipe mix for the raised beds. You don't mention manure. Why?
Well, because I'm using compost, and there's also the one for the raised beds. Yes, you could add manure. The one for the containers for pots, you don't add manure. The reason it's not on there is manure is just too subject to interpretation, the term. And I've seen people wipe stuff out left and right with manure.
That sounds like a good answer.
Compost, I do use a lot of compost in that stuff. And I will add one quick thing is that is finished compost. Not necessarily if you go to a garden center to buy a bag of compost, it may have a lot of wood chips in it still, or it may be composted, and labeling laws are such that composted is easy to mistakenly pick up thinking it's compost, and it's not. So buyer beware.
Very good. Yeah, those are all the right reasons there,
Yeah.
Okay. So Kimberly Thomas said there was a link on the first slide. Yes, Kimberly, I'm going to get that slide back up as soon as we finish up with Bill here. But again, University of Arizona, Gila County Cooperative Extension, you'll be able to get to this stuff. Sweta Sridhar asks, I put shade cloth above my Armenian cucumber plant, and I'm seeing less pollination. Is there a correlation?
Well, as far as my own personal experience is, and I don't know where these plants are, but I have found that Armenian cucumber so far, the fuller the sun, the better for them. You may not get the blossom. I'm not sure, if they're in the shade. Now, I know tomatoes do a lot better with shade where I live, but the Armenian cucumbers, full sun.
Okay, there you go, full sun. Okay, next question about using pumice as in part of your soil mix. What do you think of pumice? From Allison.
I have been dying to try that. Every time I drive between Douglas and Bisbee, I see that pumice plant out there, and I try to figure a way to sneak in and get a pickup load of it. never used it, but I really would like to try. It should be pretty good stuff.
It should be good stuff, you know, as long as you can get it cheap, because it's light,
Yeah.
porous. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And as long as you can get it in the size that you want.
Well, you might be able to have to crush it yourself.
Yeah. There you go.
A anonymous attendee, what about metal pots? Are they no good?
Oh, metal pots are fine. I've used wash tubs and stock troughs, as long as you drill them full of holes. The bottom.
Oh, hey, we're just about questioned out here. This is
Good.
great. Okay, and I want to get back to you about the Terra Cotta.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Casey Vuksanovich? Did you meet her before she passed away? She was our master gardener and garden specialist in Globe area. And she absolutely loved the terracotta pots. She never let those go. She had them, particularly for what you just said. They are porous and they breathe.
Yep.
So they keep the roots cooler. You know, they just kind of were her favorite. And so,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of benefits, I think, to the terracotta, just kind of easier on those roots, but you do need to irrigate them.
Yeah. Well, and it's a natural substance. I mean, that alone tells you a lot.
And Janet Ortega again asks, where can you get holes drilled on ceramic pots?
Well,
okay, go ahead.
I used to buy them at a nursery that would do that for you. But, you know, to drill a hole in ceramic, all you need is a core drill. So, and I'm sure you probably know somebody with a core drill. You know, if nothing else, you could go buy one bit. A core drill, run a little water over it while you're drilling ceramic, and you'll be fine. A regular drill just basically breaks them.
Yeah, that's what I said. You need the right type of drill,
Uh-huh.
and so as long as you got the right bit and be patient, you can work through it.
Yeah.
Leslie asked me about my plants behind me. Do you recognize these plants, Bill?
No, they grow in water. I hardly know what water is around
Yeah,
here.
I know. This is the giant lily. I'm trying to remember which queen they're named after, but last fall I took my wife and we visited the Mortella Gardens on Ischia Island outside of Naples, Florida.
Wow.
And so this was one of their indoor sites where they can grow this, and aren't those amazing?
Well, it looks like
Giant
you could make a pizza pan out of one.
Well, I definitely have nymphs living on top of them, and just all this imagination you could have about them.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, I just saw somebody pop up something that CACSS has pumice. Who is CACSS? Whoever put
So,
that there.
Suzanne, you'll need to spell out that acronym for us, please. And Robin says, you mentioned your preferred system for automated system for pots.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you doing there?
Well, start with a filter. Number one, filtered water. I've got a couple of different things I've been using depending on where they are. I'm using some little half-gallon an hour misters for hanging pots. But for stuff on the ground, I have come to really like these things called a spot spitter. Oh, Central Arizona cactus and succulent. Is anybody familiar with spot spitters?
I am not.
Yeah, they're pretty handy, and they're a real simple system. It's other people call them spit sticks. You put the little tube over the top and you stick it in your pot and it sprays the surface. They come in a multitude of flows, you know, anywhere from like 3.8 gallons an hour up to like 40 gallons an hour. And of course, what I like about them is that you wind up running them for 3 or 4 minutes at a time. you know, just boom, done with the water. But spot spitters, they're just so darned easy. They're easy to clean. If they clog, you just pull them out. If you move a plant, you just take it, you pull the stick out, you turn it around. One side's a sprayer, one side's a plug.
Just go ahead and write that name of that one more time for us in the chat, Bill.
All right.
And I'm going to go ahead and bring this presentation to a close. Thank you, everybody who took the time to fill out that survey for me. It's very helpful. I may put that into the chat box before at the end here. And I just want to put a plug in for our next week's presentation. Next Thursday, July 30 at 11, I'm going to have Carol Ikarius, who is the CEO of Coalitions and Collaboratives. She's up in Colorado, and they are very concerned about what to do post-fire. So we've been having some of these wildfires in Arizona. How do communities recover from that? And so she put together, hosted a conference last year and has this website called aftertheflames.com with a lot of information on what communities can do after a wildfire. And so the topic's going to be when the smoke clears, the road to recovery following large-scale wildfire, and particularly the Bighorn fire going on in Tucson. We had our bushfire in Gila County this month, last month also. So very timely. Please share that with people. Anybody living in the wildland urban interface, you know, this is appropriate presentation for you. Bill, if you want to put up that potting mix, I'm going to let you
okay. Back to
again.
the
I got half my group's already taken off. I don't blame them. But I knew we'd have a heck of a turnout for this. Bill, I think we were up to about 140 participants.
Wow.
At one point. So this was
That's
great.
amazing.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you get that up there. And as soon as you do, I'm going to stop the recording and sign out.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Thank you, everybody who's held on to the end here.
There we go. Can you see that now?
And go ahead and put that on full.
Yeah.
Oops. Okay, good. Whew, that one scared me. Okay.
Yeah.
So there it is. The homemade potting soils. Again, I suggest taking a picture of it. As our one person asked, we put it at the end. So there it is. So signing out. Thank you so much, everybody. I am hitting the stop record.